Part 13. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 121. After the water swallowed Dragon Man Qiao, countless arms made of liquid appeared inside, restraining Qiao's entire body, and even his wings could not move. The water turned into a sphere and carried Zhou towards the behemoth. The giant creature opened its mouth and swallowed Zhou into its belly. The gene body and the elemental body went through several wars 7 million years ago, Rose said. I suffered from this thing at that time, and later I learned to be smarter. This thing has a very small, only by crushing the core can you win. If you cut the water like Dragon Man Qiao, it is no different than seeking death. However, it is understandable. Dragon Man Qiao is only 300 years old. She is too young. She has never experienced a war with elemental bodies, so she probably has no knowledge in that area, Rose said lightly. Chen Tao said, that guy swallowed Dragon Man Qiao, what does he want to do? Rose said, the water elemental body can generate huge pressure in the body. It swallowed Qiao. The purpose is to crush Qiao through the huge pressure. Sure enough, Chen Tao could see Qiao struggling inside the huge object, looking very painful. This scene made Chen Tao frown. It would be easier if it were anyone else, but Longren Qiao, she is Lin's good friend. Before, when Chen Tao was threatened by Rose, Qiao took the initiative to help Chen Tao because he was afraid that something would happen to Chen Tao. Although it was not necessary for Chen Tao still remembered the favor. Brother Chen Tao, save her! Suddenly a voice came. Chen Tao came back to his senses and looked at Li Xiaolu beside him. Li Xiaolu's delicate face was nervous, and her big eyes looked at Chen Tao uneasily. Chen Tao nodded slightly. Even without Li Xiaolu's advice, Chen Tao was planning to leave. Chen Tao's figure disappeared from the spot. He entered the huge body and saw Qiao in front of him. Qiao was still struggling, his face extremely ugly. At the same time, Chen Tao could still feel the pressure coming from all directions. Chen Tao's body is already the 6th generation of genes. No matter what kind of pressure it is, it will not affect him, but he can still feel it. Chen Tao ignored these pressures, came to Qiao's side, stretched out his hand, and hugged Qiao into his arms. The two figures disappeared from the same place, and when they reappeared, they were more than 30 meters away from the behemoth. After the surrounding environment returned to normal, the pain on Qiao's face gradually eased. She fluttered her eyelashes, slowly opened her eyes and looked at Chen Tao. Saw Chen Tao. Qiao's eyes sparkled and he said, Chen Tao. Chen Tao said, are you okay? Zhou nodded slightly. Bang. Suddenly, there was a loud noise. The loud noise attracted Qiao's attention, and she raised her face to take a look. The behemoth had already noticed this side. It raised its hand and hit the side with its fist made of water. As he approached here, he was suddenly blocked by a transparent shield. Bang, the fist shattered and water splashed everywhere. Chen Tao slowly put Qiao down. Qiao looked at Chen Tao's back and said, how did you know I was here? Chen Tao said, Xiaolu was curious about extraterrestrial civilization. In order to avoid danger, Rose gave Xiaolu a mirror. Through the mirror, she can see the situation of other civilizations. Then she happened to see the situation on your side. Qiao's eyes glowed with luster and he said, is it a mirror made by World Tree? It's not important. What's important is that you were rescued, Chen Tao said lightly. Qiao pursed his lower lip and said, it doesn't matter if I am rescued, I have to get rid of that thing. It is a monster from the outside world and does not belong here. If it continues to destroy like this civilization will be destroyed. It must be solved, okay? Isn't it important that she be rescued? Chen Tao glanced at Qiao subconsciously, and he looked away. In other words, for Qiao, the balance of the universe is the most important, more important than her own life. The balance of the universe is her belief. Chen Tao didn't say anything. The half-moon blade appeared and instantly grew in size. The giant half-moon blade passed by and slashed towards the behemoth. Wow! The behemoth was chopped into two pieces in response. Seeing the scene in front of him, Chiao's eyes were a little more shocked. That behemoth was comparable to a mountain. Was such a mountain directly cut off by Chen Tao? What is this power? Chiao has seen this kind of power before, that is, when her Queen Katie used all her strength to call out all the sharp silver weapons, she had such an effect. In other words, does the man in front of her already have the same strength as her queen? The behemoth did not die after being cut off. Instead, it regained new water from below, grew again from the broken place, and returned to its original shape in the blink of an eye. My dear, you have to find the core. Rose's gentle reminder sounded in Chen Tao's head. Core. Time stops passing. Everything around turned into code blue. The behemoth also turned into a blue code. The blue code composed of giant objects looks neat, but at one point, the code there is very dense. Completely different from the code elsewhere. Chen Tao had a thought. Code is erased at a speed visible to the naked eye. Time resumes its passage. Bang! The behemoth lost its core support, turned into a puddle of liquid, and dissipated. My dear, that's great. Rose's joyful voice sounded in his head. Chen Tao didn't care much, he looked at Chiao behind him. Chiao looked at the scene in front of her, her expression was full of surprise. She looked at Chen Tao. What did you do? Hearing this, Chen Tao said, just as you saw, erase it. In this way, your mission is completed. Erase. Chiao was a little shocked, but it was hard to say anything. She looked at Chen Tao and said, thank you very much for saving me and helping me solve it, otherwise I don't know what to do. Chen Tao said, it's nothing, you are Lin's friend, it's normal to help you. Okay, after you get it done, go back, I should go back too. Chiao nodded slightly. Chen Tao's figure disappeared on the spot. Chiao looked at the place where Chen Tao disappeared, and a smile appeared on her face. Really handsome, worthy of being the man that Lin likes. Chen Tao's figure disappeared on the spot, and when he appeared again, his figure had returned to the room. A fragrance came. A beautiful figure threw herself into Chen Tao's arms. My dear, it's amazing. Chen Tao was slightly startled and looked at He Yuxuan in his arms. Looking at He Yuxuan's delicate smile, Chen Tao also smiled. The elemental body invaded the genetic body civilization. This kind of thing has not happened for more than 6 million years. A voice came. Chen Tao looked at Rose beside him. Rose sat on the sofa with her arms around her chest. She said, it seems that this elemental body has evolved without our knowledge. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 122. Chen Tao looked at Rose, who looked a little serious. Chen Tao said, I don't care how the elemental bodies evolve. As long as they don't come to provoke me, I have no interest in them. Hearing this, Rose's eyebrows stretched slightly. She looked at Chen Tao, then smiled and said, yeah, that's right. The dragon civilization should be the one to worry about, not us. Rose stood up and came to Chen Tao's side. She gently hugged Chen Tao's arm, looked at Chen Tao, and said with a smile, let's do something serious. Chen Tao pulled his hand out of her arms, stroked Rose's hair, and said, no, I'll go out for a walk and relax. Now Yuxuan and Xiaolu, their control over genes is not complete. As a sister, you should take some time to teach them. At least teach them how to analyze the rope, so that they won't be tied up next time and can't escape. When He Yuxuan and Li Xiaolu heard this, they both looked a little embarrassed. Rose looked at Li Xiaolu, she smiled, nodded slightly, and said, okay. Chen Tao nodded, he opened the micro wormhole, and stepped through the micro wormhole. After passing through the micro wormhole, Chen Tao's figure appeared in Yuehu manner. Seeing the familiar Yuehu manner in front of him, Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly. Master the android next to him saw Chen Tao and immediately smiled and greeted him respectfully. This android looks exactly like Wu Yao, with a number on his chest. It's number 10. Chen Tao nodded slightly. He didn't say anything, and went out of the door on his own and left Yuehu Manor. Chen Tao walked on the side of the road, and he looked around at the familiar and somewhat unfamiliar environment. This feels a bit special. After all, Chen Tao has lived in base number 1 for a while. During this time, all the food and drinks were brought up by the maids. So Chen Tao doesn't need to come down at all. Occasionally breathing the air here feels pretty good. Halfway through the walk, Chen Tao noticed a group of people gathered on the road ahead. Chen Tao took a closer look and found that there was an accident. A man was lying on the ground, with a smashed motorcycle next to him and a car on the other side. Next to the car, a man with short hair touched the back of his head and looked at the man lying on the ground. The man with short hair looked a little unhappy. The people around him gathered around, pointing and talking as if they were watching a good show. This man with short hair just ran a red light and ended up hitting the man on the motorcycle. This man is driving a Panchi car, right? Wow, he's rich, there's going to be a good show to watch. Seeing this, Chen Tao felt a sense of novelty. You have to know that Chen Tao's side is the Tal district. If it was in the past, if there was an accident in the Tal district, the driver would just run away and no one would care about you so much. Now the driver started driving the Panchi car, which is a luxury car in the Dhar district. Such a person has a high status, but he not only did not run away, but also looked depressed. This scene is very interesting. Ding dong ding dong. At this time, Chen Tao heard the sound of police sirens. He looked back and saw a car with a siren coming towards the side. It's the people from Hong Tao's organization. Hearing this, those people made way. The car stopped slowly. Chen Tao glanced at the car, which had a Tao logo printed on it. A woman in a black uniform got out of the car and walked to the scene of the accident. She squatted down and checked the injured. She frowned, then looked at the scene, stood up, looked at the short-haired man, and said, "The person is gone, you follow me to the police station and explain the accident." The short-haired man looked ugly and looked ashen. He sighed, then followed the woman into the police car. The woman looked out the car window at her companion who was still parked at the scene and said, "Ajahn, keep an eye on the scene." Ajahn nodded. The woman drove away. Only Lin Zhen, her companion, was left. Lin Zhen took a camera and took pictures seriously at the scene. Looking at the woman's serious look, Chen Tao felt much more comfortable. This is the Hong Tao organization, which is an organization created in the name of Chen Tao to maintain the balance of this continent. Currently, it is managed by Lin Na. But Chen Tao did not expect that Lin Na could manage the Tal district so well in such a short time. It was a bit beyond Chen Tao's expectations, but Chen Tao also felt relieved. It seems that letting Lin Na manage the order is the right choice. Chen Tao retracted his sight and stepped forward. Ding ding ding. Suddenly, a mechanical sound sounded. Hearing this sound, Chen Tao was stunned. What is this sound? At this time, Chen Tao noticed that the people nearby were staring at Chen Tao, as if they saw something interesting. Among these people, Lin Zhen was also included. Lin Zhen, who was taking pictures just now, stopped and looked over here with her eyebrows slightly frowned, looking a little angry. Chen Tao seemed to realize that something was wrong, and he turned his head to take a look. With this look, he understood what was going on. There was no traffic light on the sidewalk before, but now there is one, and when Chen Tao just stepped onto the sidewalk, the light was red. Chen Tao ran a red light in front of the traffic police. What? Lin Zhen walked over to Chen Tao, she looked at him and said, "Sir, the light is red now, please stand back." She looked a little stern. Chen Tao was a little depressed. He didn't expect that his Hongtao organization would manage order and manage him. Chen Tao had no choice but to retract his foot. Seeing this, Lin Zhen looked at Chen Tao and said, "Just now there was a car accident because of running a red light, and that person's life was lost. You don't learn a lesson here and run a red light again. Although the sidewalk is different from the lane, the consequences of breaking the law are equally serious." Lin Zhen said, "Take out your ID, register it, and fine you for 30 minutes. A fine of 30 minutes, this can only be said to be a punishment similar to a warning. It can be said that it is not painful." Chen Tao said, "The fine is fine, but my ID is at home and I didn't bring it out. You can't perform a micro wormhole to take things in front of these ordinary people, right? That would be too eye-catching." Chen Tao doesn't want to be surrounded by reporters again in a while. Lin Zhen frowned and said, "You have to register. Wait a minute, wait for our people to come, then register and leave after registration." Chen Tao had a headache. He didn't expect to encounter such a thing when he went out for a walk. But order requires people's cooperation. Lin Na worked so hard for so long to make the order so good. If Chen Tao messes up, it will not be good. Ding dong ding dong. At this time, the sirens sounded. A car slowly drove over and saw the car. Lin Zhen said, "Here we are, let's go, follow me." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 123. Chen Tao followed Lin Zhen to the car marked with Tao. Lin Zhen approached and opened the car door. "What's wrong?" The woman in the driver's seat looked at Lin Zhen. Lin Zhen said, "This guy ran a red light and didn't bring his ID. I want to register him." "Use the computer to check." The woman glanced at Chen Tao and said, "Okay." There is a small notebook in the car. Lin Zhen took out her laptop and put it on the car. She typed on the laptop's keyboard, then looked at Chen Tao and said, "Name." Chen Tao said. Lin Zhen said, "The identification number." 146794. Chen Tao reported the number. Lin Zhen entered the number and pressed the enter key. The entire screen adjusts the information. 3 big words "not registered" are displayed on the screen. Seeing this, Lin Zhen frowned and looked at Chen Tao. Chen Tao was slightly startled. What's going on? An idea flashed in Chen Tao's mind, and he understood it all at once. Hongtao's organization's information system was probably rebuilt by Lin Na, so the identity certificates of the people living here were probably replaced with new ones, and the previous ones from Black Swan were probably discarded. The identity certificate that Chen Tao reported to Lin Zhen was the identity certificate that Black Swan gave to Chen Tao before. Of course, this identity certificate was not registered in the Hongtao organization's information system. The corner of Chen Tao's mouth twitched. Lin Zhen looked at Chen Tao and said, "Follow me to our Hongtao Security Bureau." Chen Tao suddenly became a little depressed. If Lin Zhen finds someone who has not registered an identity certificate, she will take them back to the Security Bureau to ask for registration. This is an inevitable procedure. But Chen Tao was not in the mood to go to the Security Bureau. He came here for a walk today, but he didn't expect that this walk would cause so many headaches for him. Chen Tao looked at Lin Zhen and said, "I'll get a new identity certificate later. I've been staying at home for a while and haven't gone out. I don't know that my identity certificate has been changed." Lin Zhen said, "It's not good. If that's why you didn't register your identity certificate, I'll take you to our security bureau and I'll register you myself. Then I'll give you a temporary identity certificate. That would be better." With that said, Lin Zhen walked to the driver's seat. The woman next to me saw this and got out of the car consciously. Lin Zhen sat in the driver's seat and said to Chen Tao, "Get in the car." Chen Tao was a little helpless, but he had no choice but to run away. Otherwise, it would be the same as absconding in fear of crime, and Chen Tao had not committed any crime. Chen Tao sat in the passenger seat, leaning against the back of the seat. He connected to Lin Na's channel and said, "Is it Lin Na? Master? I'm here." Lin Na's voice suddenly became a little excited when she heard Chen Tao's voice. After all, Chen Tao rarely contacts Lin Na. Generally speaking, Lin Na takes the initiative to contact Chen Tao. It can be said that so far, this is the first time Chen Tao has contacted Lin Na. Chen Tao said, "Didn't you get my identity certificate?" Lin Na was silent for a moment. Chen Tao said, "I ran a red light now, and a little beauty is taking me back to the Hongtao Security Bureau. I'm a little annoyed now. This is my mistake. I'll handle it right away, I'll handle it right away." "Master, who is that little beauty who took you away? What is her number?" Lin Na's voice was trembling slightly. Chen Tao glanced at the number on Lin Zhen's badge next to him. Chen Tao said, 4522, it seems they call her Lin Zhen. "Okay. I'll do it right away," Lin Na said quickly. Lin Zhen on the side looked at Chen Tao through the car's interior mirror. Chen Tao's soliloquy made Lin Zhen a little confused. "Who are you talking to?" Lin Zhen asked. Lin Zhen didn't see Chen Tao wearing Bluetooth or using a mobile phone. She only saw Chen Tao talking to himself. This scene was a bit strange. Chen Tao said, "No, I'll just call my friend." Lin Zhen was silent for a moment, and then she said, "I suggest you wait a while for the registration to be completed, and then go to the neurology department to have a look." Chen Tao fell into silence. This was regarded as a mental illness by her. However, it is normal. After all, Chen Tao used the genetic ability in his body to talk to Lin Na through the genetic channel. This high-tech communication method does not exist in this world. Since it does not exist, it is naturally talking to itself. Talking to oneself but saying that you are talking to others is normal for being treated as a lunatic. Chen Tao had a headache, but it was hard to explain. He could only close his eyes, sit quietly in the car, and wait to go to the security bureau. It didn't take long, maybe 10 minutes. Chen Tao felt the car slowly stop. Chen Tao opened his eyes and found that he was at the door of Hongtao Security Bureau. Lin Zhen got out of the car. Chen Tao also got out of the car. Lin Zhen took Chen Tao into the Hongtao Security Bureau. Lin Zhen took Chen Tao into an office. There was a man in a black uniform sitting in this office. When the man saw Lin Zhen coming in, his eyes lit up slightly, a smile appeared on his face, and he said, "Lin Zhen." Lin Zhen said, "Brother Hai, this person has no registered identity certificate. Please register him." When the man heard this, his eyes fell on Chen Tao, he looked at it for a moment, and nodded slightly, "Okay." Lin Zhen looked at Chen Tao and said, "Here, fill in the information." As she said that, she patted the table next to her. There were some information sheets on the table. Chen Tao walked over, picked up a pen, picked up a sheet, and filled it out. Xiao Hai looked at Chen Tao, he stood up, looked at Chen Tao, and said, "Why do you look familiar to me?" Chen Tao said, "Really?" He didn't pay much attention and filled in the information. Xiao Hai said, "Yeah, very familiar, seems to have seen it somewhere." As he said that, his eyes fell on the information sheet and noticed the name that Chen Tao had just filled in on the information sheet. Xiao Hai muttered to himself, "Chen Tao." Lin Zhen, who was standing by, crossed his arms and looked at Xiao Hai. Xiao Hai touched his chin, "Chen Tao, huh? This name is also very familiar. Brother Hai, do you know this person?" Lin Zhen looked at Xiao Hai strangely. Xiao Hai shook his head, "It's not someone I know, but the name and appearance are very familiar, it seems to have been seen somewhere." Chen Tao was also a little concerned about Xiao Hai's speech. Could it be that Xiao Hai had seen Chen Tao before when he was on the news? However, it has been a while since that news. If he saw it at that time, Xiao Hai should have almost forgotten it. Just then, a female team member ran in from the door in a panic and said, "Brother Hai, Sister Zhen, get out. The team leader is here." Lin Zhen was stunned and said, "Team leader, what is the team leader doing in our bureau?" Lin Na, the team leader of the Hongtao organization, is the supreme commander of the Hongtao organization. She carried the entire Hongtao organization with her own ability, and then maintained the order of the entire 10th level with the help of the Hongtao organization. How could such a great person come here? At this time, Xiao Hai seemed to remember something. His pupils condensed slightly, looked at Chen Tao, and said, "I remember. You are that Chen Tao." My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 124. Xiao Hai's face changed at this moment. Noticing the change in Xiao Hai's expression, Lin Zhen said, "What's going on?" Xiao Hai's face was as pale as paper. He looked at Lin Zhen and said, "This person is Chen Tao. When you joined the Hongtao organization, have you ever entered the Hongtao organization's headquarters? In all the rooms in the Hongtao headquarters, there are hanging photo. Do you still know the content of that photo?" When Lin Zhen heard this, she said, "Of course I know that the content in that photo is the photo of the aircraft named Base 1 located above Yuehu Manor. What's wrong?" "That's right, the military strength of our Hongtao organization at the beginning came from Base 1. Our Hongtao organization is just a military branch of Base 1. Simply put, Base 1 is the highest command base of our Hongtao organization." Xiao Hai looked at Lin Zhen and said, "Do you know who the top commander of base number 1 is?" Lin Zhen was startled. "Chen Tao, the highest commander is Chen Tao?" I didn't know what Chen Tao looked like at first, until I was fortunate enough to be summoned by the team leader. I found a photo in the team leader's office. The person in the photo was who, do you know? Lin Zhen felt the hairs all over her body stand up, and her eyes looked at Chen Tao. Xiao Hai said, "Yes, that's him." His eyes fell on Chen Tao. As for Chen Tao, it was as if he hadn't heard them talking. He was still filling out the information form on his own. Lin Zhen's face turned pale. Xiao Hai swallowed, he seemed a little at a loss. "Brother Hai, Sister Zhen." The girl who came in to call for someone felt the strange atmosphere, and she hurriedly spoke out. "No need, I'm coming in suddenly," a voice came. A beautiful figure walked in from outside the door. It was Lin Na. Lin Na frowned, glanced at Xiao Hai and Lin Zhen, and her eyes fell on Chen Tao. Seeing Chen Tao, Lin Na's expression changed slightly, and she hurried towards Chen Tao. Team leader Lin Zhen greeted. Team leader Xiao Hai also said quickly. Lin Nalai ignored them, walked to Chen Tao and said to Chen Tao, "Master, I'm sorry, this is my negligence. Are you okay?" "Owner." Lin Zhen and Xiao Hai looked at each other, both of them were a little confused. Lin Na, the dignified supreme commander of the Hongtao organization, actually called the guy who ran the red light his master, and she spoke so respectfully. Chen Tao glanced at Lin Na and said, "What you did was indeed wrong. However, you have been busy enough during this period and it is understandable that you have neglected. Just make it up to us later." Hearing Chen Tao say this, Lin Na seemed to be relieved. Lin Na looked away, looked at Lin Zhen and Xiao Hai, and said, "Who are you two?" "The one who brought our supreme commander here." She sounded annoyed. Lin Zhen's face turned pale and she said, "It's me." Hearing this, Lin Na frowned and was about to speak. "Forget it," Chen Tao said. Lin Na was slightly startled and looked at Chen Tao. Lin Zhen also looked at Chen Tao, her eyes glowing with luster. Chen Tao said, she was also doing her duty. In the previous situation, she did nothing wrong. It was just my negligence in not registering my identity certificate in time that made it so embarrassing. With that said, Chen Tao handed the information form in his hand to Xiao Hai and said, "Register it for me and prepare the proof of identity and send it to Yuehu Manor." Xiao Hai hurriedly stamped his feet, saluted, and said, "Promise to complete the tasks assigned by the commander." Now he became a commander. Chen Tao nodded slightly and looked at Lin Zhen. When their eyes met, Lin Zhen's eyes glowed with a hint of luster. Chen Tao smiled, walked over, patted Lin Zhen's small shoulder, and said, "Well done." After the pat, Chen Tao strode out with his hands behind his back. Seeing this, Lin Na hurried over and followed Chen Tao respectfully. Xiao Hai and Lin Zhen looked at Chen Tao's leaving figure. Xiao Hai breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Fortunately, the Supreme Commander is very kind, otherwise we would be doomed." Lin Zhen nodded and said, "Supreme Commander, I think he is so handsome." Xiao Hai was startled and looked at Lin Zhen. Lin Zhen looked at Chen Tao's back with a strange luster in her eyes. The corners of Xiao Hai's mouth twitched and he fell into silence. "Master, why did you come down from base No. 1, Lin Na said as she followed Chen Tao. Hearing this, Chen Tao said, "I came down for a walk. I have nothing to do now. You can go back to work first." Lin Na was startled, and then she said, "This is quite a distance from base number 1. I'll drive you back." Chen Tao said, "No, I don't plan to go back for the time being." Lin Na pursed her thin lips and said, "Then let me accompany you." Hearing this, Chen Tao looked at Lin Na. Lin Na was wearing a black business attire, a black cylindrical skirt and black stockings, with slender legs and a pair of cylindrical high-heeled boots. Her long hair was tied up, revealing her fair and slender neck. Looks extremely capable and beautiful. She had a beautiful face, and she looked at Chen Tao with a glint in her eyes. Chen Tao looked away and said, "No, you have a special status. I'm worried that people will be watching you soon." Hearing this, Lin Na hesitated for a moment. She could only nod her head and said, "Master, call me if you need anything." Chen Tao nodded slightly. Chen Tao continued to walk forward, and Lin Na stopped. Chen Tao raised his hand, waved to Lin Na, and left. After this episode, Chen Tao continued his walk. During this walk, Chen Tao noticed that the Tal district was completely different from the previous Tal district. Every place was well behaved and orderly. Chen Tao was very pleased and satisfied with the results of Lin Na's efforts during this period. When the walk was over, it was already evening. In the evening, Chen Tao returned to the room of the only base number 1 through the micro wormhole. As soon as he entered the room, Chen Tao smelled a faint fragrance. He came back to his senses, turned his head, and looked at the bed beside him. There was a beautiful figure lying on the bed. It was a girl, wearing a thin white silk nightgown, lying on her side on the bed. Her fabric was close to her slender waist, her shoulders were thin, and her figure was slender. Looking down, the skirt is very short, and a pair of long legs, about 1.2 meters long, are straight and slender, pressed sideways. Her long hair, as black as ink, is naturally draped on the bed behind her, matching her tall and perfect body, outlining a beautiful pattern on the bed. Because the girl had her back to him, Chen Tao did not recognize her. Her skin was as white as cream, so it should not be Rose. Who could it be? Run to his bed. Chen Tao approached her with a curious attitude. Perhaps she felt the movement behind her, so the girl turned over and looked over here. Their eyes met. Seeing the person in front of him, Chen Tao was slightly startled. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 125. I saw a smile on the beautiful face in front of me, and the clear eyes were full of joy. You're back. This girl is actually the dragon Lin? But where are her wings? Lin moved closer to Chen Tao's arms, She snuggled into Chen Tao's arms, closed her eyes, and looked very happy. No wonder Rose likes to stay in your arms so much, it turns out to be so comfortable, Lin seemed to mutter to herself. Chen Tao looked at Lin's delicate face, he smiled, gently stroked her soft hair, and then stroked her back. Strange, where are her wings? Chen Tao said softly, Lin, your wings. Lin raised her face, looked at Chen Tao, and said, I put away my wings and horns, do you like this? Chen Tao was slightly startled, and he looked at Lin. The reason why she put away the dragon wings and dragon horns was to make Chen Tao like it? Chen Tao smiled and said, you are so beautiful, I like you no matter what. Lin looked at Chen Tao with her big eyes, and her face slowly approached Chen Tao's face. She said softly, if you like it, why don't you kiss me? The beautiful face in front of her was getting closer and closer. The two faces were close at hand. Chen Tao looked into her eyes and he moved closer to her. They kissed. Lin closed her eyes. The lips parted. Lin's eyelashes trembled, and she slowly opened her eyes. There was a luster in her eyes, and she was a little happy. Lin looked at Chen Tao with her big eyes, quietly looking at Chen Tao, with expectation in her eyes, as if waiting for something. At this time, Lin's eyes condensed slightly, she seemed to have noticed something, and turned her face to look up. Looking at Lin's abnormality, Chen Tao said softly, what's wrong? Lin said, there is a message that I have never felt before is approaching here. As she said, Lin raised her hand, and a blue picture appeared in front of Chen Tao. Through this picture, Chen Tao can see a huge humanoid object made of pure water, flying through space at a very fast speed. This huge humanoid object has a body that looks convex and concave, just like a woman, with eyes, a mouth, and clear lines, but the body looks very huge. Elemental body. Lin's eyebrows slightly wrinkled. Elemental bodies usually stay in their own areas, why do they suddenly come to Earth? Lin frowned and talked to herself. Chen Tao looked at the humanoid object in the picture. Chen Tao had seen this humanoid before. Isn't this the female elemental person that Rose saw before through the mirror? Chen Tao said, I'll go ask. Hearing this, Lin looked at Chen Tao and said, elemental bodies are different from our genetic bodies, you have to be careful. Chen Tao nodded slightly. He got off the bed and his figure disappeared on the spot. His figure appeared in space, and in front of him was the huge water man flying towards him. The female water man noticed Chen Tao and she slowly stopped. Chen Tao crossed his arms over his chest, connected to the communication channel of the water woman, and said, are you okay? The body of the water woman was very huge, more than 20 stories high. Perhaps because she heard what Chen Tao said, the body of the water woman began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. From more than 20 stories high to the same height as Chen Tao, the person shrank, but the density of water increased. At this time, a strange situation appeared. The body of the water woman became like a human woman, with a translucent skin color, looking delicate and smooth, and delicate features. She looked at Chen Tao, her mouth was not open, but Chen Tao could hear the sound. My planet is facing an irreversible disaster, and my home is being destroyed. I must find another place to live. I could sense the breath of life emanating from your planet before. I believe that your planet has a place suitable for me to live, so I came. The water woman looked at Chen Tao with a blank expression. Chen Tao crossed his arms, looked at the water woman in front of him, and said, are you alone? The water woman said, I am the first one to come here, and there are tens of thousands of people behind me. Suddenly, a micro wormhole appeared next to Chen Tao. Lin, wearing a battle armor, walked out of the micro wormhole. She looked at the water woman and said, tens of thousands of water elemental bodies entering the earth will have a huge impact on the environment of the earth, and your existence will affect the development of the earth civilization. As a dragon, I cannot agree to this. The water woman looked at Lin and squinted her eyes. Whether you agree or not is your business. Our people are eager to find a planet with water sources, and we want that place. Lin frowned and said, in the name of the dragon civilization, if you dare to invade the earth, I will sacrifice your blood. She pointed the silver-white longsword in her hand at the water woman. The water woman squinted her eyes and her body suddenly swelled. She once again turned into a 20-story high behemoth. She stared at Lin. Dragon civilization, I know that your technology is indeed powerful. 7 million years ago, our ancestors also fought with you and were defeated. But we are no longer the same as before. If we really fight, you may not be our opponent. Do you want to have another physical battle? Lin stared at the female waterman and said, if you want, we dragon people will accompany you. Wait a minute. Chen Tao raised his hand to stop the two people's increasingly angry arrogance. Lin looked at Chen Tao. Tao. The female waterman's eyes fell on Chen Tao again. Earthling, is there anything else you want to say? Chen Tao slowly retracted his hand. He looked at the water woman and said, I have seen the picture of your planet through the mirror made of the world tree before. Your planet seems to have water sources. Yes, why do you say there is a disaster on your side? The water woman said slowly, our star is burning more and more energy, which has affected our planet. At present, the water vapor in the planet is gradually evaporated into the atmosphere, and after some parts form clouds, they will not be able to come down. It is expected that in half a year, all the water in our planet will evaporate into the atmosphere and form clouds, but because of the energy generated by the greenhouse effect, that water will be locked in the air in the form of clouds and cannot fall. By that time, our planet will be an uninhabited death star. She looked at Chen Tao. We can only take advantage of now to escape from the planet we are on and find a new planet. Chen Tao thought for a moment and said, in other words, if the planet you are on can return to its previous appearance, you will give up invading the Earth planet. It can be said that, after all, who wants to leave their home? The female waterman said slowly. Chen Tao said, that's a simple matter. I can help you rebuild your new home. The female waterman stared straight at Chen Tao without speaking. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 126. Lin looked at Chen Tao and said, Tao, can you do it in a situation like theirs? Lin felt a hint of disbelief. According to what the water woman said, the planet was almost killed by the temperature of the star in its own galaxy. From the perspective of Lin, who is a dragon-human civilization, this is a law of nature that cannot be changed. Even if Queen Kati of the Draconian civilization, which possesses the highest technological civilization in the known universe, is brought over, it will not help. But Chen Tao actually said that he would go against the power of nature and change the ecology of that planet. Hearing this, Chen Tao looked at Lin and said, have you forgotten? I said that I can rebuild the universe. Compared to rebuilding the universe, this matter in front of me is just a small thing. Lin blinked her eyes. Yes, Chen Tao had said before that he could rebuild the universe, but even knowing this, Lin still felt a little incredible. After all, rebuilding the universe seems to be something out of reach for her. Although she wanted to believe Chen Tao, it was too exaggerated and unbelievable. I don't think the technology of the dragon civilization can reach this level, the female water person said aloud. Chen Tao crossed his arms across his chest, looked at the female waterman, and said, I am not from the dragon civilization, I am from the Earth Star civilization. As for whether I can achieve that level, you can only evaluate it after I do it. Not too late. Chen Tao looked at the female waterman and said, if you forcefully invade the Earth planet, as the dragon people who maintain the dragon people civilization, it is impossible for you to easily destroy the balance of the universe. A war will inevitably happen. The female waterman said calmly, "We are not afraid of dragon civilization." Chen Tao said, "But you will also pay a lot for this, right? And I see that you elemental bodies have been living on your own planet and have not come out to expand or invade other people's civilizations for so long. This means that you should also. They don't like war, they are creatures that yearn for peace. If that's the case, then why take the risk of war and give up the chance to regain your original homeland?" The water girl didn't move, just stared at Chen Tao quietly. Chen Tao crossed his chest with his hands, looked at the female waterman, and said, "Think it over carefully and then give me an answer." The water woman was silent for a moment. After a long time, Chen Tao looked at Lin beside him. Lin said, "Elemental bodies are independent-minded individuals. There is no king to say, only companions. She is probably discussing this matter with her companions now." Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly, and his eyes fell on the female waterman. In other words, the answer will be available soon. Fight or accept Chen Tao's help. After a long time, the water woman finally spoke. She said, "We all agree that the Earth Star civilization cannot have such an ability. We judge that you intend to delay time and buy time for other dragon people civilization to arrive." "You are deceiving us," the water woman said. "The Earth Star will be the home we all long for the next day. Anyone who stands in our way will die." The huge female waterman suddenly rushed towards Chen Tao and Lin. The entire body turned into a huge water ball, swallowing Chen Tao and Lin inside. Lin's face changed slightly, and she said, "This guy actually attacked us directly. We have to find her core. Damn it." Feeling the terrifying pressure coming from all directions, Lin's face turned pale. "You will be crushed into pieces by the pressure of the water inside my body," the female waterman said without any fluctuations in her voice. Chen Tao looked at Lin beside him, and he had an idea. Lin's body was transported far away by the wormhole. When Lin appeared again, she appeared 300 meters away from where she was. Lin's breathing was calm. She looked ahead and frowned, thinking to herself, she must find the core of that guy. Her eyes glowed with a green code, and she looked back at the huge female waterman. The female waterman turned into a green code pattern, but the problem was that she couldn't find it. Damn it! Lin frowned. Although Lin is currently the most experienced dragon warrior among the younger generation, she is still too young for the elemental body. There is not much data about elemental bodies in Lin's database. She couldn't find the core of the elemental body. Lin turned off the code mode and looked at Chen Tao. At first glance, to Lin's surprise, she found that although Chen Tao was wrapped in the giant body and was under the pressure brought by the terrifying water pressure, Chen Tao's expression did not change at all. Lin felt as if Chen Tao was taking a bath, relaxed and comfortable. "Why," the female waterman seemed to be in disbelief, "why is my attack ineffective on you?" Chen Tao said calmly, "Your elemental body's attack method is indeed special, but unfortunately, your pressure has no effect on me." As he spoke, Chen Tao looked around and his eyes fell in a direction in front of him. There was a transparent bead there, which was invisible to the naked eye. But Chen Tao just saw it through the code mode. He raised his hand and the bead fell into Chen Tao's palm. "Stop," the female waterman's voice was a little more nervous. Chen Tao shook his hand. "Kaka." There was a crisp sound. This pool of water slowly dispersed, picking up the core power. They could no longer maintain the appearance of gathering, and could only slowly disperse, beautiful in this universe. Chen Tao opened his palm, and the broken beads fell to the ground. Chen Tao said lightly, "I gave you a chance before, but you didn't cherish it." "Dear, how did you find her core?" a voice came from the side. Chen Tao came back to his senses, and he looked at Lin beside him. Lin looked at Chen Tao curiously. Chen Tao said, "Have you forgotten? I can enter the code mode and analyze them." "Of course, finding the core is also a piece of cake. Lin's eyebrows stretched slightly, she smiled and said, "You are worthy of being my man, so amazing." Hearing this, Chen Tao smiled. Lin said, "But, I heard that she has many companions coming, otherwise, I will tell the queen about this and let the queen come." Hearing this, Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly, and he said, "No need, for me, no matter how many they are just a group of ants." Ants. Lin looked at Chen Tao, her eyes were shining with a trace of admiration, and she also had a smile on her face. She likes confident men. Chen Tao looked ahead, and suddenly, Chen Tao saw it, right in front of him. One by one, glowing dots flew towards the side. Slowly, Chen Tao saw groups of water people. Those huge monsters made of water, like a huge army, flew towards the side. "Here they come," Lin frowned and said. "My time is running out." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 127. Chen Tao stood in space, without wings, and he didn't need wings. He just looked at the huge monsters coming in front of him. His expression didn't change at all. Chen Tao had absolute confidence. If these guys wanted to fight, Chen Tao could make them feel something and fear in an instant. Two huge wormholes appeared beside Chen Tao, and two half-moon blades appeared from the wormholes, slowly rotating around Chen Tao, ready to take action at any time. However, at this moment, a voice sounded. "We are not here to seek war." A deep voice sounded in Chen Tao's channel. The group of water people had approached, but when they approached Chen Tao, they slowly stopped. One of the male water men who looked like a human male floated out. He looked at Chen Tao and said, "I just saw your power. Although we can't believe that you can recreate our planet, we are willing to give you some time. Don't fight anymore." Chen Tao looked at the humanoid behemoth in front of him and said, "Your people were killed by me. Aren't you angry?" "Anger is something that only genetic bodies have. We don't have that kind of thing," the male waterman said slowly. He said, "She is not dead, but just returned to the world before she was born. It seems that they really won't be angry." Originally, Chen Tao was going to practice with these weird things, but after hearing what they said, Chen Tao had to give up. Chen Tao looked at the creatures in front of him and said, "I can help you, but as compensation, I need you to agree to one condition." "What condition?" The man's voice was low and slow. Chen Tao crossed his arms, looked at them, and said, "Serve me as king." When Lin heard this, she looked at Chen Tao, and her eyes had a hint of brilliance. "This is impossible. We don't accept any king." The voice was as slow and low as ever. Chen Tao said, "If you don't accept it, then I won't help you. I can help you, but you must accept my conditions, otherwise, I can't do things for you in vain." The humanoid behemoth made of water fell silent and didn't speak. About 3 minutes later, Chen Tao heard the voice again. "In any case, we can't accept any king, but if you can really save our home, we are willing to admit that you are our eternal friend. If you have difficulties, we will come to help you. At the same time, we can promise that we will never invade the earth." The slow voice sounded again. Hearing this, Chen Tao was silent for a while, his hands folded across his chest, his fingers touched his arms, and he stared at the behemoth made of in front of him. The field fell into silence. Lin, who was on the side, looked at the scene in front of her, and her heartbeat slightly accelerated. Chen Tao was alone, and on the opposite side were thousands of behemoths. Those behemoths were as high as 20 stories, and each one was huge. There are so many huge monsters standing in front of Chen Tao. Chen Tao's body looks so small. But now facing so many huge monsters, Chen Tao is not afraid at all, and even crushes them in aura, and even takes the initiative. Lin looked at Chen Tao with an inexplicable feeling in her eyes. He is indeed the man she likes, very handsome. Lin's heartbeat is now faster, and she is very excited. Chen Tao looked at the huge monster in front of him and said, "In this case, okay. Then next, we will go to your planet." The monster heard this and said, "Okay." Suddenly, the scenery around changed. Lin was stunned, and she looked around. She found that she was flying in the air, with dark clouds above and lakes below. She was in outer space just now, and now she appeared on a planet, which is incredible. More importantly, Lin looked at the thousands of huge monsters floating in the air in front of her. Lin's eyes trembled slightly, and she looked at Chen Tao. As far as Lin knew, elemental bodies would not use high-tech skills such as wormhole displacement, which means that this was done by Chen Tao. To do this, it is necessary to directly analyze and decompose all the tens of thousands of water people and move them here through the wormhole. This ability cannot be achieved even by Queen Kati of the Dragon Civilization, who borrowed the Dragon King's Academy. You must know that doing so requires a huge amount of data computing power. Tens of thousands of water people who are as strong as Xiaoshan and comparable to the second generation of genes. To decompose them, the amount of data that needs to be processed is not something that even the Dragon King's Academy can do in a short time. Lin looked at Chen Tao and was shocked to see Chen Tao show his terrifying data processing ability again. In addition to Lin, the water people were also shocked. The water people looked around. The water man who had been talking to Chen Tao looked at Chen Tao. "My friend, your strength has surpassed our cognition. We now believe that you can save our world. We express our sincerest apologies for our previous doubts about you." The voice was still low and slow without any fluctuations. Chen Tao looked at the giant in front of him and said, "I can't hear any apology in your voice, but, forget it, I guess your tone can only be like this. Then this is the planet you live on, right?" Chen Tao looked around. There were lakes on this land. You could see the surging water in the lakes, but it was different from ordinary water. There was white mist above the water here. It looks like it's probably warm water. Suddenly, Chen Tao felt his surroundings turn white. He raised his face and could see a flash of lightning flash across the sky. Boom! There was a loud noise and a roar came from the sky. Dark clouds rolled in the sky, and a little drizzle fell from the sky. Chen Tao could feel that it was very hot on this planet. It felt like being in a steam oven. The heat was terrifying. Fortunately, Chen Tao is already the 6th generation of genes and has long been immune to cold and heat, so nothing will happen to him. There is something strange about this planet. Although there are many dark clouds in the sky, it is only light rain. If there were so many dark clouds on the Earth planet, it would probably have been raining heavily. The temperature here is too high, and the water has evaporated into the sky, forming dark clouds. Most of the water is locked in the air, and only a small part falls down. Then the water will evaporate up again. This is an endless cycle, Lin said. At the current rate, in half a year, the water on this planet will be completely evaporated into the atmosphere and locked in the clouds, never coming down. Lin looked at Chen Tao and said, "The reason for this is because of the changes in the stars. In the past, the stars were not so hot, and this is where perfect creatures lived. But now the heat is too great, so this situation has occurred." She looked at Chen Tao and said, "No one can change this kind of rule of nature so far. Tao, what are you going to do? My time is running out." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 128. As a dragon from the Dragon Civilization, Lin knows very well. The star in the galaxy of Earth is the Sun. In this galaxy, this star has no name, so it is directly called a star. The reason why stars are called stars is because humans believe that they are eternal and unchanging, so they are called stars. But in fact, stars are not eternal and unchanging, and stars have a lifespan. Because the evolution of stars is regular, stars are also divided into childhood, middle age, old age, and other periods. The heat emitted by young stars is low, and when they reach middle age, the heat emitted will become higher. The planet where these elemental bodies live now, and the star they orbit, is leaping from childhood to middle age. Therefore, the heat increases. Because the temperature of the star increases, the life that originally lived in this planet is naturally not suitable. This is the law of nature, and no one can stop it. With current technology, it is impossible to stop the changes in stars. But Lin looked at Chen Tao's handsome profile, and her eyes were shining. The man in front of her was incredible. He had done many things that she thought were impossible to do. So can he do it this time? Chen Tao looked at the sky and said, "I'll go up and take a look." As he said that, the ring on his finger turned into a white light, landed on Chen Tao, and turned into a pair of wings. He spread his wings and flew upwards. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning flew directly from the dark clouds and hit Chen Tao's head. Chen Tao did not dodge and let the lightning fall on him. Boom! With a muffled sound, a burst of purple-white light swayed on Chen Tao's body, which was the light of lightning. The light dissipated, and there was no trace of injury on Chen Tao's body. Chen Tao passed through the dark clouds, and there were lightning and thunder in the dark clouds, and the lightning struck Chen Tao directly. For Chen Tao, the power of this lightning was like tickling. No, maybe tickling is more powerful than this lightning. Chen Tao passed through the atmosphere and came to the outer space of the planet. Chen Tao was in outer space. He looked down and found that almost 80% of the area of the planet under his feet was covered by dark clouds. It looked very shocking. Chen Tao looked in the direction of the star. The star over there emits dazzling light, shining towards this side. "What should we do?" Lin's voice sounded beside him. Chen Tao looked at Lin, and he retracted his gaze. At this time, liquid was gathering around Chen Tao. After a while, the liquid turned into a strong man of the same size as Chen Tao. Unlike humans, his whole body was made of water. The man looked at the stars in the distance, and then looked at Chen Tao. It was obvious that he also wanted to know what Chen Tao would do. Time stopped flowing. Chen Tao's eyes were filled with blue codes, and everything around him turned into blue codes, including the huge star in front. Looking at the code on the star, Chen Tao's thoughts moved, and the binary code on the star began to be cleared at a speed visible to the naked eye. The star is indeed transitioning from infancy to adulthood, but for Chen Tao, the star is just a program. The program will grow by itself. As a programmer, Chen Tao can easily curb its growth, and at the same time rewrite its code and reprogram it back to infancy. In the past, Chen Tao's half-baked ability would not have allowed him to program, but things were different now. When Chen Tao upgraded to the 6th generation of genes, he knew how to program various material structures in the universe. This included how to program young stars. In the past, programming stars required the power of nebulae, but now Chen Tao did not need it at all. With his own genetic support, he was able to rewrite the program code of the star. Not long after, the star code was rewritten. The blue code in Chen Tao's eyes slowly disappeared. Time resumed. Chen Tao looked at the star again. The flames that the star spewed out were very large before, but now the flames that the star spewed out were much less. Lin's eyes were filled with a trace of astonishment. She looked at Chen Tao and said, "This is..." She was a little bit unbelievable. In just a moment, in the blink of an eye, Lin clearly felt that the heat emitted by the star had decreased. When she looked at the star, she saw that the flames that the star spewed out were much less. That is to say, at that moment, Chen Tao changed the star, making the heat emitted by the star less. Unbelievable, Lin stared at Chen Tao with a look of disbelief in her eyes. Lin knew that Chen Tao could open the inner world, so she also knew that Chen Tao must have made some changes in the inner world at that moment. But this was too incredible. It was too unbelievable for Lin. That was a star. Could a star be edited with code? But even if Lin didn't believe it, the fact was right in front of her. "I feel that the heat emitted by the star has decreased a lot, although with my wisdom, it is a little hard to imagine how you did it, but you did it. A low and slow voice came. Chen Tao looked at the male waterman beside him. The male waterman looked at Chen Tao with a little more respect. He said, "From now on, you are a friend of my tribe. If there is any place where my tribe can be used, just say it." Chen Tao looked at the male waterman and said, "I really have a problem here, and I need you to solve it for me." The male waterman looked at Chen Tao and said, "Just tell me." Chen Tao said, "Have any of you invaded other planets in the past few days?" The waterman fell silent. Chen Tao knew that this guy was probably asking his companion. Chen Tao didn't bother either. In fact, Chen Tao's question was caused by the scene he had seen through the mirror given by Rose before. Zhou's battle with the elementals. The elemental body that fought with Jiao did have some similarities to the man in front of him. Chen Tao wanted to know if that elemental body was from his planet. The male waterman looked at Chen Tao and said, "Our people are all here. We yearn for peace and don't like war. If our planet hadn't encountered such a disaster, we would not have chosen to invade the Earth. As for other planets, currently our people have not been to any place other than their home planet." Chen Tao frowned. Chen Tao said, "A while ago, an elemental body similar to yours launched an invasion of the planet and killed many genetic bodies." The male waterman said, "In addition to us, there are many elemental bodies in the known universe, but most of them are peace-loving. They will actively invade other people's planets. As far as I know, there is indeed an elemental body force. They called itself an elemental civilization. At the same time, they established an elemental body composed of dark elements as king. Their people also approached us and wanted us to enter them, but we refused." "You said, the elemental body has a king," Lin on the side showed an astonished look. "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 129. Chen Tao looked at Lin beside him, who seemed surprised. Chen Tao said, "Is it strange that the elemental bodies worship their own kind as king?" Lin looked at Chen Tao and said, "It's strange. I don't know much about the elemental bodies, but there is one thing that is certain in my database. Each elemental body has its own thoughts. Each of them is very intelligent and disdains to recognize any other creature as king. I have never heard of an elemental body worshipping another person as king. Even if it is worshipping its own kind as king, it is not common. It can be said that it is very unusual." Lin looked at the male waterman and said, "Why do elemental bodies worship others as kings? Do you know the reason?" The male waterman said slowly in a low and slow voice, "Powerful, this is why those elemental bodies are willing to follow it. I have never seen such a powerful elemental body. Its power is almost impossible to describe in words. Those elemental bodies that follow it think that by following it, they can rule the universe and change this world dominated by genetic bodies into a world dominated by our elemental bodies." Lin frowned and said, "If you want to rule the universe, you have to ask our dragon civilization." The male waterman did not speak, and his expression did not change at all. Chen Tao looked at Lin, who looked solemn. He retracted his gaze and looked at the male waterman, saying, "You are right not to join them. Just live and work in peace in your homeland. As for the things outside, you don't need to intervene for the time being." "Okay," the male waterman responded slowly, and his figure turned into a stream of water, flew down into space and into the planet. Chen Tao looked at the figure of the male waterman leaving, and his eyes fell on Lin's face. Lin's expression was solemn, and she seemed to be thinking. She looked at Chen Tao and said, "Dear, I have to tell the queen about this." In fact, Lin could have contacted her queen herself, but she told Chen Tao first, hoping to get Chen Tao's consent. In other words, Lin really put Chen Tao first. Chen Tao nodded slightly and said, yeah. If the elemental body wants to rule the universe, the first thing to bear the brunt must be the dragon civilization that regards maintaining the balance of the universe as its own belief. Of course, according to the elemental body, the genes of the entire universe, including the people on Earth, will also be the enemy of the elemental body. Let Lin contact Kadi first to provide Kadi with some information, which can help them deal with the elemental body. The elemental body is the common enemy of the gene body at this moment. Helping the dragon civilization is equivalent to helping himself. Chen Tao will certainly not stop Lin from contacting Kadi. Lin's eyes glowed with green code. She put her hand to her ear and said, Queen. At the same time, in the hall of the Dragon King, Kadi was sitting on a bench on the high platform, wearing soft armor, a cloak, and crossing her legs, looking at Zhou below. Qiao bowed his head respectfully and said, My queen, the Behi civilization, Leo civilization, and Akal civilization have all been attacked by the elemental bodies recently. Kadi frowned slightly. Elemental bodies, are those old things starting to act again? Zhou bowed his head and said, Yes, the Behi civilization under my jurisdiction is the first planet to be attacked by the elemental bodies. For this reason, I looked up the information of the elemental bodies and found that compared with the elemental bodies of 7 million years, the elemental bodies at this moment have undergone a lot of changes. Their attack methods have become more varied. Well, after all, it has been 7 million years. We are evolving, and they must be evolving too, Katie said casually. Queen, suddenly, a voice sounded in Katie's ears. Hearing this voice, Katie said, Lin? What's wrong? Hearing that it was Lin's voice, Katie's eyes became more interested. She leaned back in her chair and listened to the voice coming from the channel. Lin said, Queen, I got the information that the elemental body has a new king. New king? Katie frowned slightly. Lin said, yes. Katie narrowed her eyes and said, elemental bodies rarely recognize others as kings. This is quite interesting. Lin explained, this is the information I got from an elemental body. According to that elemental body, it is because the independent elemental body has powerful power. Other elemental bodies believe that it can rule the universe and snatch back the universe dominated by the gene body. Katie smiled and said, that's really interesting. Okay, I know. I will handle this matter. You continue to follow Chen Tao. Okay, Lin nodded slightly. Kadi hung up the call. She slowly stood up, picked up the silver-white longsword beside her, looked at Qiao, and said lightly, let's go meet that element, king. Kadi raised her eyebrows, and she and Qiao disappeared on the spot. Lin looked at Chen Tao beside her and said, okay. Hearing this, Chen Tao smiled and said, the matter has been settled, let's go back. Lin nodded slightly. The figures of the two disappeared on the spot. When they appeared again, the two returned to the room. As soon as they returned to the room, Chen Tao only felt a fragrance coming, and someone entered Chen Tao's arms. Chen Tao was slightly startled, and his hands habitually hugged the other person's waist. He looked carefully and found that there was an exquisite and flawless face in front of him. She had a pair of clear and moving big eyes, a high nose bridge, small lips, and pointed ears. She looked at Chen Tao with a smile and said, dear, where have you been? I miss you so much. She put her arm around Chen Tao's neck, her big eyes staring straight into his eyes, her eyes full of attachment. This enchanting woman, of course, is Rose. Chen Tao raised his hand and hugged Rose by the waist. He turned around and put Rose on the bed, his eyes fell on Rose. Rose changed her clothes, she seemed to have just taken a shower, wrapped in a bathrobe, her figure was really amazing. Her waist was held, but her upper body held up the bathrobe high, very amazing. Looking down, the long legs that were at least 1.2 meters long were straight and slender. Rose pulled Chen Tao's face in front of her. The two faces were close at hand, and their eyes met. Rose looked at Chen Tao with her eyes full of expectation. Chen Tao held Rose's hand and said, "Be good, I'll play with you again tonight." Rose was slightly startled, she pursed her thin lips. Chen Tao pulled her arm away, stood up slightly, and looked around. He found that the girls were all in the room. Chen Tao was a little confused and said, "Didn't you go out to play?" Ziking was wearing a tight outfit, looking at this side, with a smile on her face, and said, "We were just using Xiaolu's mirror to watch you fight those monsters." Chen Tao looked and found that Li Xiaolu was indeed holding a mirror in her hand. Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly, and he said, "There's nothing to see. It's almost time. I'm hungry. Let's have lunch." Yeah, the girls all stood up. On the other side, Katie's battleship appeared in a dark world. In front of Katie, there was a huge monster made of black fog. On the huge monster was a dark chair, and a woman was sitting on the chair. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 130. The woman was looking at Katie with squinted eyes. Katie held the silver white sword and looked at the woman in front of her. Katie couldn't help but frowned. "Are you the king of elements?" Weird. The woman in front of her gave Katie a weird feeling. This woman's skin was the same as that of ordinary people, as fair as cream, and her figure was bumpy. She was wearing black soft armor. What was different from ordinary people was that she had a diamond-shaped crystal on her forehead. She sat on the bench, crossed her legs, and stared at Katie. This person looks almost exactly like the genetic body, but as the king of dragons, Katie will not be deceived by this appearance. She can feel the material that formed this woman. It is not genes, it is darkness. The woman in front of me is an elemental creature born from the darkness. After the birth of ordinary elemental creatures, it is not that simple to stabilize their body shape, but the woman in front of him can control her body exactly like the genetic body. This ability was enough to make Katie feel a little strange. The woman stared at Katie without saying a word. Katie's eyebrows stretched slightly. "Do it." The group of female dragons following Katie held silver white swords and swept forward. The elemental bodies behind the elemental king also came forward. "Fight with the female dragon." Katie stood up slowly and stood on the battleship. She raised her hand and pointed it at the strange woman in front of her. The micro wormhole opened, and a sharp silver weapon flew out from the micro wormhole and slashed towards the elemental king. The body of the elemental king, together with the behemoth mount below, were chopped into two pieces. The behemoth dissipated. The scattered body of the elemental king slowly gathered together again to form the human body just now. The elemental king's eyes fell on Katie. Boom. There was a muffled sound. Katie only felt a shock in her brain, and a strong and terrifying tingling sensation came from her brain. Katie's face turned pale, she took a step back and fell into the chair. "What's going on?" Katie's face changed slightly. "Cuddy, king of the dragons, the era of the genetic body has ended, and from now on we will usher in the era of our elemental bodies." An emotionless voice sounded slowly. Katie felt that the surrounding environment had changed, and the surroundings became dark. Looking at the dark world in front of her, Katie's face turned pale. In 7 million years, Katie has never been as scared as she is now. Katie knew what was going on. There are two types of attacks in the known universe. The first, physical attack. Physical attack is the dominant attack method in this world. Whether it is cold weapons, hot weapons, or sharp silver weapons, they are all physical attacks. Attack by attacking the opponent's body. The second type is mental attack. Mental attacks are attacks on the brain. This type of attack is rare. Katie can also use the ability of the Dragon King's Academy to carry out mental attacks on others. However, in fact, Katie's research on spiritual aspects is not deep. That area is like a taboo area, difficult to study. And now Katie can be completely sure that the attack launched by the Elemental King is exactly a spiritual attack. Why can the elemental body master such powerful spiritual attacks? Katie looked around. In this spiritual space, Katie found that she could do nothing. Now Katie feels just like when she faced Chen Tao, all the gene functions in her body have been shut down. She found herself trapped. We can only stay in this spiritually constructed space and cannot live without it. He slowly sat down, sitting on the dark ground, looking at the dark world in front of him. You underestimated the enemy, Katie said lightly. Katie had no idea that in these 7 million years, the elemental body had evolved to the point where it could freely use mental power. In the outside world. Queen, Joe looked ahead. I saw Katie's body wrapped in black mist. Katie didn't react at all. Her eyes were closed and she was held in mid-air by the black mist. Chiao frowned and looked at the battlefield next to her. The battlefield continues, but after losing Queen Kati, the momentum of the dragon people has been greatly reduced, but the opponent's momentum has been greatly increased. The battle was one-sided. Chiao bit his lower lip and said, "In the name of the right protector, I give the order to withdraw." The dragons heard Zhou's order and began to retreat. Chen Tao didn't know about the battle between the dragon people and the elemental bodies. Now Chen Tao still stays at home and lives a comfortable life with his girls. Chen Tao was lying on the bed, pillow on his head, looking at the ceiling in the sky. "Honey, what are you thinking about?" came a voice from beside me. Ziyiqing snuggled next to Chen Tao, looking at Chen Tao with big eyes full of love. Chen Tao turned his head and looked at Ziyiqing. He gently stroked Ziyiqing's hair with his hand and said softly, "We used to be just two ordinary people in the slums, but so much has changed in just a short time, it feels like everything is in a dream." When Ziyiqing heard this, she smiled and moved closer to Chen Tao's face. Kissed Chen Tao. Parted lips. Ziyiqing's big eyes were shining with joy. She looked at Chen Tao and said with a smile, "What about now? Do you still feel like you are in a dream?" Chen Tao smiled, "It's more like in a dream. I was kissed by such a beautiful woman." When Ziyiqing heard this, she rolled her eyes at Chen Tao, her face turned red, and she hid her face in Chen Tao's arms, but her face was full of happiness. Chen Tao stroked her hair, hugged her gently, and kissed her forehead. "You are really happy. Unlike us, we have to worry about the people around us all the time." Suddenly, a voice sounded in the bedroom. Hearing this voice, Chen Tao frowned slightly. He turned slightly sideways and looked at the source of the voice. Sitting on the sofa not far away was a woman. The woman has a pair of white dragon wings and horns. She is sitting on the sofa with her legs crossed and looking quietly here with a smile on her face. Seeing this woman, Chen Tao frowned and slowly sat up. "Bai Yao, what are you doing here?" This woman kidnapped Ziyiqing before. Chen Tao's impression of her was not very good. Bai Yao smiled and said, "Last time, because I wanted to get to know you, I took Ziyiqing away without your consent. I'm sorry about that, but please believe me, for you, for Earth Star. I always respond with kindness." Chen Tao frowned slightly and said calmly, "If you have anything to do, just tell me." Except for Lin, everyone in the dragon civilization never goes to the Three Treasures Hall for anything. There must be a reason for Bai Yao to come here. As soon as he came over and apologized for what happened before, there was only one possibility. This woman wanted something from Chen Tao.